Hello everyone, Charcoal here. Today is kind of a silly video, something that's been on my mind for a bit and I want to put out there just for the hell of it. For those of you who have paid attention to my background music, most of it is from the game Monster Hunter World. I've played it, it's a really fun game. I've gotten through some of Iceborne but haven't finished it yet, even after... Wait, Iceborne came out 4 years ago? No way, I refuse to believe that. Anyway, I started thinking about combining Monster Hunter with my biggest love, Pokémon. That is, giving every large monster in the game Pokémon typings. So that's what I'm doing today. Let's lay out some ground rules. Only monsters from Monster Hunter World and its expansion Iceborne will be included here because that's the only one I've played. I am not including the crossover event monsters like Behemoth and Leshen, and I must use each of the 18 Pokemon types at least once, but prepare to see a lot of fighting types and flying types and probably a good handful of rock and dark types. Let's start with monsters from the base game going in rough story order. Great Jagras is pure normal. It's the first big monster of the game, doesn't proc any ailments, no elemental damage, it's a normal type. Kulu-Ya-Ku is normal flying. Let me explain my logic here. There are a lot of normal flying types in Pokemon. Pokemon like Pidgeot or Staraptor who should really be pure flying. But I think normal flying does work on flightless birds like Dodrio. Same case with Kulu-Ya-Ku, normal flying. Puke is poison grass. I was considering poison flying, but it's really the only candidate for grass since it only lives in forested areas and utilizes its poison by eating nuts off trees and spitting them back at you. So I landed on poison grass. Barroth is rock ground, Juratodus is ground water, Tobi-Kadachi, taking heavy inspiration from flying squirrels, is electric flying, Anjanath is fighting fire, Tsitsi-Ya-Ku is pure fairy because his whole gimmick is using light to blind his enemies, and fairy is the closest thing we have to a light type. Paolumu is pure flying, Great Gyros is poison dark, Radoban I went ground dark because it sticks bones to itself by rolling around in tar, Rathian is fire poison, and Rathalos is fire flying. Sure, both of them can fly and both of them have poison, but the difference comes from which aspects they use more. Rathian's fight puts emphasis on her poisonous tail, and she mostly stays grounded. Meanwhile, Rathalos swoops around everywhere to rain fire on you from above. Diablos is pure ground, Legiana and its variant Shrieking Legiana are flying ice, Odogaron is pure dark, Basilgoose and its variant Seething Basilgoose are flying fire, Dodogama is rock fire, Lavasioth is ground fire, Uragon is rock steel, and Deviljho and its variant Savage Deviljho are fighting dragon. Moving on to the handful from Iceborne, Beatotus is ground ice, Banburo is fighting ground. I considered fighting ice, but it can appear in every locale for some godforsaken reason, and the elemental damage it does depends on what kind of terrain it's digging up with those antlers. Barioth and its variant Frostfang Barioth are ice flying, Nargacuga is dark flying, Glavenus is steel fire, Tigrex was a hard one to figure out, but I eventually landed on pure fighting. Brachydios and its variant Raging Brachydios are fighting rock. I almost went fighting fire, but I wanted to give it a more unique typing, and it doesn't actually have any elemental damage in the game. Yangaruga and its variant Scarred Yangaruga are flying poison. Zinogre is electric bug. This was a fun one. I almost didn't have anything for bug, but then I remembered Zinogre gets its electric powers from a symbiotic relationship with thunderbugs. Pretty interesting. And lastly, Rajang and its variant Furious Rajang are fighting electric. But we're not done yet. Let's move on to subspecies. I've mentioned some variants already, so I should explain the difference between variants and subspecies. Variants are basically stronger versions of the base monster and are genetically identical to the base monster. They start their lives as the base monster, but can become the variant form if the right conditions are met. For example, Furious Rajang is just a Rajang who became unable to turn off its supercharged state after losing its tail. Subspecies, on the other hand, are different genetic branches from the base monster, playing into real-world evolution. These monsters are typically adapted to different lifestyles or environments and wield different elements or abilities. That being said, there are still a small handful of subspecies that, while genetically different, are effectively just stronger versions of the base monster, so they keep the same types. Pink Rathian and Gold Rathian stay fire poison, Azure Rathalos and Silver Rathalos stay fire flying, and Black Diablos stays pure ground. This is just a female Diablos in mating season. Capcom really needs to change its classification to a variant instead of a subspecies. Moving on to the actually different ones, Viper Tobi-Kadachi is poison flying, Coral Pookie Pookie is water flying, Nightshade Paolumu is flying psychic, maybe flying grass would have made more sense with the whole sleep powder thing, but it's also the only real psychic candidate, so I had to go with that. Fulgur Anjanath is electric fighting. Remember for regular Anjanath I made fighting the primary type? I decided to switch them around here because from what I can tell, Fulgur actually uses its element a lot more. Acidic Glavenus is steel poison, Ebony Odogaron is dark dragon, Brute Tigrex was another iffy one like its standard counterpart, but I went with fighting dark, and Stygian Zinogre is dragon bug. Same concept as regular Zinogre, but Stygian uses Dracophage bugs instead of thunder bugs. Finally, we have the big guys, the Elder Dragons. I should note that they're not all automatically dragon type, they're more like legendary Pokemon, which can be any type. Zora Magdaros is rock fire, Kirin is pure electric, Nergigante is normal dragon. This was probably the hardest one to figure out, but I went with normal to signify his lack of an actual element, and dragon because he is the elder dragon that feeds on elder dragons. He is their great equalizer. Dragon type just felt fitting. Ruiner Nergigante is the only variant that actually differs in type from its base form, with its metallic spikes granting it the typing of steel dragon. Kushala Daora is flying steel, Valhazak and its variant Blackveil Valhazak are poison ghost, Teostra is pure fire, his female counterpart Lunastra is fire fairy, Kulvtaroth is steel fire, Namiel is water electric. I love his fighting style to create puddles of water and detonate them with jolts of electricity. That is so clever. Xenojiva is born from pure Elder Dragon bioenergy, so naturally his typing is pure dragon. His adult form, Safijiva, is Dragon Fairy. He still wields that dragon energy but with much more control, and he now resembles a typical fairy tale dragon. Shara Ishvalda has two distinct forms. Its armored form is Rock Ground, and its unarmored form is Pure Ground. Alatreon, one of the few elusive black dragons, is a very interesting case. His gimmick is that he commands all the elements and switches between them as he fights. I imagine he functions like Arceus. His strongest attack is even called Eschaton Judgment. I'd say Alatreon is just a normal type when he's sitting around not doing anything, but can change his type at will depending on what he needs to call upon for battle. And last but certainly not least, Fatalis. Not just a black dragon, the black dragon. Anyone who's seen his fight will agree with me when I give him the classic Dragon Fire. And I believe that is all of them. Like I said, this was just a silly little idea I wanted to get out, but coming up with the list was still really fun. Next time, we're jumping back into Wings of Fire by taking a look at its new release, A Guide to the Dragon World. Thank you for visiting Charcoal's Den, and I'll see you all in the next video.